We're going to dissect the shameful secret of German tankers, one they kept quiet about in their memoirs. We'll reveal the shocking price Soviet tank crews paid for their machines' simplicity. Behind the dry numbers of armor thickness and calibers lies a real drama of iron, blood, and strategic failure. Welcome to the most honest comparison, where points are awarded not by patriotism, but by the mathematics of war. 7 rounds, 7 parameters, no legends, just facts. Let's begin.
The year is 1944. The smoke from fires blankets the horizon somewhere between the Vistula and the Oder. Here, on this shell-cratered borderland, it's not just tanks that met. 2 philosophies collided. 2 answers to one question. What should the ideal tank of total war be? We won't rely on myths. We'll weigh everything with numbers. We'll have 7 rounds, where each parameter is a new battle. And the first, most important round is the duel of guns. Firepower, precision versus caliber. Put yourself in the place of the German gunner. Your main advantage is not brute force, but cold calculation. The long, almost elegant barrel of the 75mm QWK-40/48 gun, it's a ballistics masterpiece. A shell fired from it travels to the target at a speed exceeding 700 meters per second. Its trajectory is flat, like an arrow. And at your disposal, the best optics in the world from Zeiss. You see the enemy 1.5 kilometers away with photographic clarity. A chip in the armor, an open hatch, the angle of the turret. This is a sniper's weapon, made to strike accurately and from a safe distance. However, by this point in the war, Soviet heavies were already dominating the battlefield, and against their powerful frontal armor, especially at range, even this refined tool was sometimes powerless. For phenomenal accuracy and perfect performance at medium and long range, the Panzer IV gets 8 points out of 10. Now, switch sides. You're in the turret of a T-34-85. You weren't taught sniper fire at maximum range. You were taught to strike with certainty and power. Your new 85mm ZIS S-53 gun is a fist, not a rapier. Its shell is heavier. On impact, it doesn't just pierce armor, it wrecks everything inside with blast and shrapnel. Yes, the muzzle velocity is lower. Yes, the TMFD or TSH-16 sights are simpler, and accuracy past 1 kilometer leaves something to be desired. But it doesn't matter. Your element is a range of 800 to 1,000 meters. Here, your shell is guaranteed to find its target. It's equally effective against both armored vehicles and a machine gun nest in a brick house. And now, with this gun, for the first time, you can face even fearsome tigers and panthers head-on with a chance of success. For the colossal increase in firepower, versatility, and ability to engage any target, the T-34-85 gets 9 points out of 10. The result of the first round is unequivocal, 9-8. The advantage in firepower lies with the Soviet machine. But imagine, you see the target in your perfect sight, you're ready to pull the trigger, and it suddenly swerves, hiding behind a fold in the terrain. Because all of this is useless if your tank can't get to the right point in time. A long-range, accurate gun is pointless if the enemy dictates the pace and chooses the engagement distance. And who was the king of maneuver and cross-country ability on this theater of war? The right to fire first was often determined not just by the sight, but by mobility. The score is close, and everything can change. Let's move to the second round.
So, round 2. Mobility and maneuverability. Engine against terrain. A tank is not a static firing point. It's a tool for maneuver, breakthrough, and rapid strike. And here, in the heart of each of these machines, beat fundamentally different pulses. Step into the engine compartment of the T-34-85. Before you, the famous 12-cylinder V20 diesel engine.
Its roar isn't just noise, it's a statement of phenomenal power-to-weight ratio. But the main thing isn't just the horsepower, it's the very principle. A diesel engine is not only more reliable and economical, it has colossal torque at low RPMs. What does that mean in practice? When a gasoline engine would already be screaming, trying to pull the machine out of mud, the diesel pulls smoothly and confidently, like a mighty tractor. Now look down at the running gear. Wide 500-millimeter tracks. They create incredibly low ground pressure, only about 0.7 kilograms per centimeter. For comparison, the German 4 had a significantly higher figure. Physics is relentless. The T-34-85 literally floated over autumn mud, March snow, and sodden country roads where its opponent risked getting hopelessly stuck. It was a machine created not just for roads, but for the very concept of the Eastern European theater of war. It allowed command to plan daring, deep envelopments and flank attacks where the enemy least expected them. For phenomenal cross-country ability and the tactical freedom this engine provided, the T-34-85 gets a solid 9 points out of 10. And its opponent? The Panzer IV was equipped with a decent gasoline engine, the Maybach HL-120. Powerful, well-engineered, it gave the tank good road speed, up to 40 kilometers per hour. But this coin had a flip side. The gasoline engine was more finicky, more flammable, and critically, less pulling in mud. Narrower tracks and higher ground pressure made it a machine for good roads and firm ground. The autumn Rasputitsa, mud season, turned into a nightmare for German tankers, paralyzing maneuver and chaining columns to the few usable routes where they became easy prey for aircraft and artillery. The Panzer IV was an excellent highway tank, but in conditions where there were no roads, its advantages melted away. For good but highly circumstantial mobility, 7 points out of 10. This wasn't just technical superiority, it was tactical superiority. The T-34-85 could choose where, when, and at what distance to engage. It could rapidly emerge on the flank, come from the rear, or just as quickly retreat under the cover of the forest. The Panzer IV was often forced to play by the enemy's rules on the enemy's field. But speed and maneuver are a double-edged sword. A rapid advance forward loses all meaning if the very first enemy shell stops the machine dead. Armor isn't just steel. It's time given to the crew for a return shot, for maneuver, for life. And here again, two engineering schools clash.
Speed has brought you into position. Now your life depends on how the steel meets the enemy shell. And here, the difference in philosophy is visible to the naked eye. Approach the hull of the T-34-85. The first thing that catches your eye is the angles. The frontal plate is set at a rational 60-degree angle. This isn't just design, it's physics. When a shell hits sloped armor, it must travel a greater distance through the metal. The effective, or line-of-sight thickness of the armor increases by tens of %. 45 millimeters of sloped steel performed like 90 millimeters or more of vertical plate. Add to that an extremely low silhouette, just over 2.5 meters tall. Hitting such a mobile and small target from long range was a serious challenge for any gunner. That was the genius of the concept. However, there was a downside. Under conditions of total war and mass production, the quality of the armor steel on some machines could be uneven, and the welded seams became a weak point. For the revolutionary concept, low profile and high effective protection, despite caveats about quality, the T-34-85 gets 8 points out of 10. Now look at the late model Panzer IV.
Its silhouette is taller, sterner, more vertical. German engineers, chasing protection, followed the classic path, increasing thickness. The hull front was increased to 80 millimeters, and on the H and J models, so-called Schürzen or skirts appeared on the sides and turret. But this was fighting the symptom. Vertical armor didn't give a geometric boost to protection, and the commander's cupola, excellent for visibility, became a highly visible and vulnerable target. These skirts were a palliative, an attempt to save an old platform from new threats. By 1944, the 4 had physically exhausted its reserves for seriously strengthening armor without catastrophically losing mobility. For honest millimeters of steel, but an outdated concept and high visibility, the Panzer IV gets 6 points out of 10. The concept of the future, in the form of rational angles, clashed with the classical approach, and the future won. But steel is just the shell. The true soul of the tank, its brain and nervous system, is the crew inside. Their coordination, reaction speed, and endurance determined whether this armored fortress would become a formidable foe or a helpless target. Imagine yourself inside these machines. In one, the sound of a running engine, the smell of diesel, oil, and powder. In the other, the smell of gasoline, hot metal, and tension.
The steel shell only comes alive thanks to the crew. And here, inside the cramped fighting compartments, an invisible battle for efficiency unfolded. Step into a Panzer IV. You feel the difference immediately. It's a world refined down to the details. The driver sits in a relatively spacious compartment with good visibility through his periscope. But the main thing is in the turret. Every crew member has excellent vision devices. The commander, rising in his cupola with 5 vision blocks, has a panoramic view of the battlefield, invaluable for command. And there's another quiet but decisive component, the Fu-5 radio. It was on every vehicle. This turned a platoon of panzers into a single living organism, capable of instantly changing the direction of attack, coordinating fire, and receiving intelligence data. Tactical superiority was born here, in this well-thought-out, cramped space. Yes, space in the turret with the new gun and armor skirts was at a premium, but the advantages in command and awareness outweighed this drawback. For exemplary ergonomics and total radio equipment, the Panzer IV deservedly gets 9 points out of 10. Now step into the T-34-85. Compared to its predecessor, it was a huge step forward. A new, more spacious 3-man turret appeared, and finally, the commander was freed from the gunner's duties. He could command. But the old problems didn't go away. The driver still squeezed into his seat through a tight hatch, as if into a cocoon, with extremely limited visibility. The commander's cupola on the T-34-85 provided a fragmented view through a periscopic device, not a 360-degree one. And the main thing, the 9R radio was a privilege for command tanks. The rest of the crews fought guided by the actions of their neighbor and flag signals, which, in the smoke and chaos of an attack, was nearly impossible. Working in the incredible noise of the engine, under strong vibration and cramped conditions, remained a harsh trial. For progress, but still modest crew conditions and a critical lag in communications, the T-34-85 gets 6 points out of 10. A paradox. The brilliant tactical tool of German manufacture has evened the score with a machine where the human had it harder and more cramped. This was the triumph of engineering thought over the austerity of wartime. But war is the great equalizer. It tests equipment not only in ideal range conditions, but also in mud, in the cold, after long marches and inevitable breakdowns.
The most perfect mechanism is useless if it can't be quickly returned to service by simple means. Imagine, after a hard march over broken roads, the tank's torsion bar snapped or a track came off. The outcome of a battle may depend on how long it takes the crew to fix the malfunction under fire.
Imagine not a battlefield, but a gloomy, snow-covered country road somewhere in Belarus in March 1944. A column of an exhausted German division is trying to pull several immobilized Panzer IVs out of the mire. An officer in a dirty greatcoat is in despair, a transmission failure, or a cracked torsion bar. For repairs, you need a crane, a warm workshop, specific spare parts that are no longer in the supply train. The tank, a fearsome force yesterday, is today just a pile of expensive and useless metal. Now move a couple of kilometers to the east. There's the same mud, the same problems, but the T-34-85 driver's eyes don't show despair, but focused anger. He has a sledgehammer, a crowbar, and he and his comrades are already knocking off a damaged road wheel. A spare road wheel is there. It's bolted to the armor on the rear. In an hour, 2 at most, his tank will be moving again. In this difference is the essence of the 5th round. The design of the T-34-85 by 1944 had been honed to the state of an almost perfect military tool. Its repairability was not an accident, but a deliberate doctrine. Major components were maximally accessible. The power plant, despite its power, was simpler and more durable than many counterparts. But the main thing was the running gear. The wide track consisted of links that could be replaced individually. The Christie suspension, with large road wheels, though it took up internal volume, was incredibly resilient and easily repaired even in field conditions. This tank was created with calculated cynicism. It will break down, it will be hit, but they must be able to fix it with semi-literate guys in a field workshop, often under fire. It was an extension of the soldier, just as hardy and unpretentious. For this unprecedented, meticulously planned ability to return to service, for the reliability that was the result of a long and difficult evolution, the T-34-85 gets a solid 9 points out of 10. The Panzer IV by this time was a different creature. It was the fruit of constant, desperate modernization. Each armor boost, each new gun loaded more weight onto the chassis. The initially elegant and balanced design was operating at its limit by the H and J models. The torsion bar suspension, more advanced in theory, was more complex and finicky. The transmission, designed for different loads, often failed. The tank required regular, qualified technical maintenance to a strict schedule. It was made for a different war, short, victorious, with air superiority and clear supply lines. In the conditions of a total war of attrition, when recovery vehicles were destroyed by ground attack aircraft and rear workshops retreated faster than the front, these advantages turned to dust. The Panzer's most terrible enemy was not ahead, but in its own sophisticated yet fragile mechanical nature. For engineering perfection that became a trap in the realities of the Eastern Front, the Panzer IV gets 6 points out of 10. Simplicity and ruggedness once again triumph over complexity and precision. However, let's ask a monstrous but logical question. What if such breakdowns and losses happen not to one tank, but to dozens daily? What if the war reaches such a scale that the value lies not in repairing an individual machine, but in an unstoppable, avalanche-like stream of new, fresh machines coming off the assembly line and filling any breach? Here we cross the boundary of tactics and even operational art. We enter the realm of pure strategy, the world of giant numbers, and the soulless, crushing logic of industrial mobilization.
Forget about armor and shells for a moment. Forget tactical schemes and maneuvers. There is a level where all these factors become mere statistical errors. It's the level of strategic logistics,
where the victor is not the one who makes the best thing, but the one who can make sufficiently good things in quantities incomprehensible to the enemy. We enter the world of pure, merciless numbers that, like a guillotine blade, cut off all hopes. Imagine the giant workshops of the Urals in Siberia, where evacuated factories were relocated. Work goes on in the open air by the light of kerosene lamps in bitter frost, but the rhythm doesn't falter. The T-34-85's design by 1944 wasn't just refined, it was optimized for this, so to speak, production. Parts were simplified to the limit, tolerances increased, processes broken down into the simplest operations. This allowed the use of unskilled workers, yesterday's farm girls and teenagers on the assembly line. The result? Numbers that froze the blood in the veins of German commanders. Over 25,000 T-34-85s produced from 1944 to May 1945. Peak monthly figures around 1,200 to 1,300 machines. To understand the scale, in 1944 alone, the USSR produced more T-34s than Germany produced tanks of all types, Panzer IVs, Panthers, Tigers, combined, for the entire war. This wasn't an industry, it was a conveyor belt of depersonalized military might, where each individual unit was a cog. Losses of 100, 200, 500 tanks in a major operation were painful, but not catastrophic. They were replaced faster than the enemy could report their destruction. For the ability to turn a tactical weapon into a strategic factor of unprecedented scale, for absolute dominance in the category of quantity having a quality all its own, the T-34-85 gets a perfect score, 10 out of 10. And now, the contrast. German industry, even at its peak efficiency, operated in the paradigm of peace goods. The Panzer IV was complex to produce. It required high-quality steel, precision machining of parts, many scarce non-ferrous metals for wiring and instruments. Its production was scattered among the Nibelungenwerk, Krupp, and Skoda, FOMO in Pilsen factories. Every Allied bombing raid on workshops or steel plants sent shockwaves through the production program. Peak production of long-barreled 4s, F2 models and later, was in 1943, around 300 per month. By 1944, with the shift to Panther production, Panzer IV output plummeted, and by year-end was practically halted. The total number of long-barreled 4s produced, F2 models and later, about 8,500. That's less than the USSR produced T-34-85s in half a year. Every loss was a tragedy. Every disabled machine left an unfillable gap. German tankers knew they were fighting on a shrinking island of resources. For high-quality execution, completely sacrificed on the altar of relentless war statistics, the Panzer IV gets a severe 5 out of 10 points. This was a defeat, but not on the battlefield. It was a defeat in the offices of the people's commissaries and ministries, in the blueprints of steel plants, and in the minds of production organizers. The Panzer IV was defeated not in a duel with the T-34-85, but in a duel with the Soviet tank-building conveyor belt, an opponent you can't hit with a shot from a KWK-40. However, even this impersonal statistic isn't the final word. War lives in the minds of people. It leaves behind not just loss figures, but symbols. Some machines remain in history as the fearsome weapon of an enemy, others as the embodiment of a national will to victory, as a steel symbol of liberation.
We've compared armor, speed, guns, and machines, but there's one last intangible parameter that outlives the war itself. It's the weight of the machine in history, its role not in a tactical report, but in the collective memory of entire nations, its power as a symbol. Look at the photograph. a dirty, soot-stained T-34-85 against the ruins of the Reichstag, with the signatures of the victors on its armor. That silhouette isn't just a tank, it's the personification of the entire journey from Moscow and Stalingrad to the very lair. It became the visible embodiment of the turning point of the war. Its appearance on the battlefield in 1944 didn't just mean a new modification. It meant that the strategic initiative had finally and irrevocably passed into the hands of the Red Army. It was the perfectly balanced answer to the challenge of the moment, powerful enough to fight new German machines, numerous enough to cover all fronts, and hardy enough to march thousands of kilometers on the offensive. It wasn't perfect in details, but it was perfect as a system for the conditions of that monstrous war. Its name became a byword, a synonym of Soviet tank might. For transforming from a combat vehicle into a historical symbol of victory, into the tool that liberated a continent, the T-34-85 deservedly gets the highest score, 10 out of 10. And now the Panzer IV. Its story is different. Its silhouette is the icon of Blitzkrieg, of the lightning victories of 1939 to 1942. It was the versatile, reliable, and effective workhorse of the Wehrmacht, which held the Eastern Front for years. It earned the respect even of its opponents. But by 1944, its role had radically changed. The era of Blitzkrieg was over. The Panzer IV transformed from an instrument of victory into one of many elements of a desperate defense, a fire brigade thrown into plugging breakthroughs. It remained a formidable tactical opponent in skilled hands, but could no longer determine the outcome of campaigns. Its symbolism is tied to the German war machine at its peak, but not to its finale. For outstanding service in one phase of the war and the inability to determine its outcome in another, the Panzer IV gets honorable but final 7 points out of 10. So the final score is tallied. Let's add up all the points from the 7 rounds. Panzer IV, 8 for firepower finesse, 7 for mobility, 6 for protection, 9 for ergonomics, 6 for reliability, 5 for mass production, 7 for influence. Total 48 out of 70. T-34-85, 9 for gunpowder, 9 for cross-country ability, 8 for rational armor, 6 for crew conditions, 9 for ruggedness, 10 for the assembly line torrent, 10 for the symbol of victory. Total 61 out of 70. The numbers don't lie. They put everything in its place. The Panzer IV is the flawless tactician, an engineering masterpiece pushed to its limit. It fought skillfully, precisely, professionally. But the T-34-85 is the strategist. It didn't win because it was perfect in every detail. It won because it was right. Right for the mud and Rasputitsa, for the mass conscription, for repairs in an open field, for the long, grinding advance across Europe. It was the weapon of a war that couldn't be won by skill alone, only by the total superiority of a system. The Panzer IV fought valiantly, but the T-34-85 fought to victory. And in history, in the final analysis, only that outcome matters. Like if the ruthless logic of total war won. Subscribe for more legendary duels so you don't miss out. See you next time.